Hello and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about the biggest problem I have with gaming mice, and before you say it, no, it's not QC issues. In fact, that's my second biggest issue I have with gaming mice, because as you guys know, I have had a ton of QC issues in the past. Basically only like 3 or 4, maybe 5 of my mice have had like no external QC issues, and even if it doesn't have any external QC issues, it might have internal ones like double clicking. So yeah, that I've had a lot of QC issues in the past. For example, the X2H that I got recently had a very weird shell issue where at certain points it kind of flexed or popped. It isn't as big of a QC issue as, for example, my Ninjutsu Sora just randomly spinning out, where it will just, my sensor will just randomly skip, and yeah, it's basically unusable. And in fact, even my later batch Ninjutsu Sora, which I have 2 of, even the red Ninjutsu Sora, where they said that they fixed the sensor issue, still has that issue. And I'll try to record a video later on to prove this, but right now, just trust me. I know, because every other mouse I've had in the past hasn't had this issue. This is the only mouse I have that has had sensor issues, so yeah. But even with those QC issues in mind, the biggest issue I have with gaming mice is honestly longevity. And this is why, for my next mice, I'm trying to decide between the Ninjutsu Sora 4K and the Vaxi MP01S wireless, or maybe the MP01 wireless when that comes out. And the reason why I'm deciding between those 2 mice mainly is for longevity. The Ninjutsu Sora 4K, I've heard, has fixed all the issues with the original Sora, so I know I said that my original Sora had like very bad sensor stuttering issues. However, again, people have said that they fixed the issues, and I've heard no issues of sensor stuttering on the 4K, so I'm assuming that it's completely fixed. And not only that, it has optical switches, which is what I just prefer. I just like having a mouse that just won't double click like after you use it more and more and more. It will have a bigger chance of double clicking in the future if you have a mouse with mechanical switches. So I just prefer optical switches. I prefer that consistency. And not only that, yeah, I know that Ninjutsu's build quality is great. Like externally, every Sora copy I've had is very, 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 very well built. I have no creaking, flexing issues with the shell at all. Scroll wheel feels pretty consistent. Like side buttons feel good. Like the clicks feel good. Like again, the external build quality is great. It's just the sensor issue is like the only issue I have with the Sora. So, and again, they said that they fixed it in the 4K. So I'm trusting them for the second time, and I'm hoping that that's true if I do get the mouse. But I'm also trying to decide between that and the MP01S, because even though I said that I prefer mice with like optical switches, the MP01S just has an amazing scroll wheel encoder and just lasts a long time. It's built like a tank. I've had a Vaxi mouse before, the MP01, and it really was built like a tank. It was the best built mouse I've ever had, and is insanely good in terms of build quality, which is why, honestly, I'm kind of leaning towards that mouse, because the biggest problem I have with gaming mice, I know I rambled on for a long time about the second biggest issue, but the biggest issue I have with gaming mice is longevity, and that also includes the scroll wheel encoder and just general parts that mouse companies use. Because even top tier brands like Razer and Logitech sometimes skip out on parts. For example, the Logitech G Pro X Superlight 2, which costs $160, keep in mind, has dog shit stock skates. I don't care what anybody says. No, even the biggest Logitech shill cannot fucking defend the skates. They are awful. And the fact that they changed the design from the G Pro X Superlight 1, but they didn't improve the actual quality of the skates, they just changed the design so you can't use the original G Pro X Superlight 1 skates with the new one, is really fucking scummy. And again, they didn't improve the glide of the second one basically at all. It was very scratchy when I had the G Pro X Superlight 2, even on the Saturn, which is not a rough mousepad at all. It's pretty decently smooth. So again, if you have the G Pro X Superlight 2, I'd recommend just replacing the stock skates automatically. And not only that, the side buttons were just dog shit as well. Like, they were really bad. They were very mushy, and I know people said that they were improved over the G Pro X Superlight 1, but that's not saying much, because they still were mush city. They were very bad, especially compared to my Death Adder version 3 or basically any other gaming mouse I've had. They were easily probably the worst feeling side buttons I've had ever on any mouse. And that is basically unexcusable for $160. Like, Logitech, what are you fucking doing? Like, you're making a refresh of a mouse that's extremely fucking lazy. I'm still upset about that, but that aside, the biggest issue, as I said, is longevity, but especially with scroll wheel encoders, because a lot of gaming mice skip out of that. And as I said, even Logitech with the G Pro X Superlight 2 use a TTC Silver encoder, which a lot of people have issues with. And I've actually have a scroll wheel issue with the Death Adder version 3, which on my copy, I'm pretty sure uses a Raisha not optical encoder, but just a standard mechanical encoder. And yeah, it is randomly started to scroll jump over the past few months. I did blow into the mouse and that seemed to have fixed it a little bit. However, the problem with that is that sometimes it's not just as simple as blowing into the mouse. Sometimes the dust is so far into the encoder that you have to open up the mouse and void your warranty in order to just make the mouse work properly. And if that doesn't work, then it might be a faulty scroll wheel encoder. And in that case, you have to go RMA the mouse, you have to repair the mouse yourself. So you basically just have to learn how to solder if you haven't before. Or you have to bring it to a repair shop and let them replace the encoder, which is really fucking dumb, especially since I've only used this mouse for like a year and it's already developed the scroll jump issue, which a lot of Razer mice have in the past, and it is extremely annoying. If you search up basically any Razer mouse and scroll wheel issues, you will see a plethora of scroll wheel issues, just subreddit posts, like forum posts, just of scroll wheel, of their Razer mice scroll wheel just failing. It is a very common issue with Razer mice especially, and why, again, I need mouse companies to just make their mice last longer, especially in terms of scroll wheels, because I think that's where a lot of companies kind of, again, skimp out or like kind of forget to put like a very high quality encoder in. Even if the mouse costs like $150, they put like a very standard TTC Silver or TTC Gold or Raisha or Kale. It's basically just those mouse companies that they use, instead of like an Alps encoder, which I've heard no issues about. I've heard no issues with like Vaxi mice like having weird scroll jumping issues at all, which is why, again, I'm leaning towards the MP01S as my next mouse, because again, they last a fucking long time. And not only that, also just again, side buttons and feet will just wear down over time. I get that, and that's also including the scroll wheel. I know that will just eventually wear down over time, but there are better encoders than others. That's just a given fact. And the fact that a lot of mouse companies are just kind of forgetting about a high quality encoder, or just putting like a random standard encoder in there without putting any thought into like maybe just having like a dustproof encoder like Pulsar mice are having now, or like just a preventive measure to get rid of dust, or just a higher quality encoder in general, is really dumb, especially when you're, again, paying $150, even over $100 for a mouse. You should have a better scroll wheel encoder that will last longer than these super standard just scroll wheel encoders that will not last that long. Because, as I said, if you search up any posts about scroll wheel issues with the G Pro X Superlight 2 or any Razer mouse, basically, you will see a plethora of posts, because they're just very, very, very susceptible to just randomly scroll jumping in the future. And that is just not good, again, for the longevity of gaming mice in general, which is why, again, I think mice companies need to improve the parts that they're using rather than just only focusing on like the switches and the tech itself and the sensor. Because I think this might be a hot take, especially for a lot of mouse enthusiasts. I think more companies should really focus on improving their encoders, side buttons, and just overall shell design, rather than really focusing all their attention on higher polling rate. And oh my gosh, we have the 8K polling rate. I'm still upset about this. Polling rate is not an end-all be-all of mice. I don't think it is at all. I don't think a deciding factor for a mouse should be, oh, did it have 8K polling? Because you will not really notice it a whole lot. Even on a very high hertz monitor, like 240 and above, I've heard so many people say it is not noticeable at all. And I've used 2K hertz polling on a 240 hertz monitor with the G Pro X Superlight 2, and it was a little bit smoother. But that also costed like a quarter of my battery life over the original. And that will cost even more battery life when you get to 4K hertz polling or 8K hertz polling, which will just dramatically decrease not only your battery life, but also just make more, not make more, but just decrease performance overall as well, because you're just trying to send more information from your mouse to your computer, and that just sends more data and more and more and more, and it just decreases performance and decreases battery life for not that big of an improvement. And I know I've made a video on this in the past, but it's still just something I wish mice companies can kind of just forego and decrease their mice costs over to improve their encoders or their side buttons, their scroll wheel feel in general, because a lot of gaming mice I've had in the past have inconsistent scroll wheels. And again, I think more companies should be focused on the hardware rather than the software of their mice. A lot more should be focused on the hardware. But yeah, that's basically it. I don't have a whole lot else to say. Those are my biggest issues with gaming mice, and ones that I really wish should be addressed or at least talked about in further discussion later on in the future. But that's basically it. I don't have a whole lot else to say, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.